So sorry. That was my own fault. Let's try this again, actually. I'm Brittany, this is Chuaning, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. We are continuing to read through Volume 5 of Erha. We are being told things constantly. We are being told about tangerines constantly. It's got everybody on edge, including me. But, we read for a couple of hours, and we take a break somewhere around in the middle. So we're just all going to be high-strung together, okay? We're going to go over this. We're going to go over this waterfall together, because I haven't read this, and neither have a lot of people in the chat. So please no spoilers in the chat. If you need trigger warnings, then they're down in the description, along with which chapters we're covering today. So, we're on page 201 for chapter 172. It's called Shisun Doesn't Eat Children. Which I know that I said this on Tuesday, but like, meat bun. I would say I need you to calm down, but I know you won't, so I'll just keep that to myself. All right, we're breathing deep. We're breathing so deeply. We're very zen right now, right? We're not panicked at all. I need to get my face out of here. Hello. All right. So now I can see the chat and not me at peak tension. All right. The gales the gun had stirred spread apocalyptic fire over most of Linyi. The cultivators who had come for the wedding fled on their swords in every direction, the merciless flames nipping at their heels. Any cultivator who depleted their spiritual energy lost the race and met their end swallowed by the inferno. The escaping cultivators overflew many of the villages clustered around Ru Feng's lofty cities. These commoners from the upper cultivation realm were struck with horror when they saw the great fire slowly approaching from the direction of Ru Feng's sect. The panicking families picked up to flee. But what means did they have to escape this conflagration bearing down like a flow of lava? Dad? Daddy? The cries and shouts of the villagers rose as they passed over. Shui Jingyang and the others expanded their weapons to their maximum sizes, and each pulled aboard a full load of commoners. Madame Wang murmured a continuous stream of comforting words. Don't cry, all of you. Don't cry. Slide on over and sit in the middle. Be careful. Hold on tight to each other. Don't fall. Madame Wang. Madame Wang. If anything happens to her, and this isn't my first rodeo, so I know that something very well could happen to her. It's one of the reasons why I'm stressed. But the iron fan couldn't be expanded any further, and there were too many in the villages who couldn't be saved. Kneeling at the front, Shui Jingyang leaned over to grab another wailing child. But as he tried to pull them up, the iron fan shuddered violently, unable to bear the additional weight. He had no choice but to let go and watch helplessly as that tear-stained, hopeful face was swiftly flung far behind. Shui Jingyang was a man of steely resolve, but he couldn't help howling in grief. Why? Why? Because one man was treated unfairly, he must drag all these innocents to the grave. He wept, tears rolling down his frank face. As if this world isn't already enough of a mess. As if there aren't enough people who die in vain. Parents of all time? Parents of all time. Everybody? Parents of all time? Parents of all time. Not perfect, mind you, but parents of all time. Parents of all time. Agreed? Yes. Madame Wang's eyes were also reddened. She cradled a rescued child in each arm. Both children's parents had pushed them onto the iron fan, but had been consumed by the flames before they themselves could climb to safety. The children sobbed in Madame Wang's embrace as she patted their small heads. What comfort could she offer them? She knew not what to say. She looked behind her. Out of the 10 or so cultivators who had been following them, several had disappeared, having succumbed to the fires. Others had set out in a different direction altogether, like Chuaning and Mo Run. She silently prayed for their safety, her eyes filled with tears. Not far away, Jiangxi carried the still unconscious Shui Meng, the fire's glow playing over his graceful features. His beautiful sword was ill-suited to carrying a heavy load and buzzed incessantly beneath his feet. Jiangxi glared at Shui Meng disdainfully. He'd been tempted to throw this brat off into the flames several times, but when he saw Madame Wang's imploring expression from the iron fan, he gloomily pursed his lips and held him steady. And that's what we're looking at right now, I believe. Yes, indeed. That's interesting that they chose to feature this moment. Beautiful as always, of course. I'm paying attention. It's on the back burner. It could mean nothing, but it's on the back burner. I'd be remiss if, it wasn't. Shui Jingyang was weeping as he tried to pull a younger and lighter child onto the fan. But however dearly he wished for it, his weapon had nothing left to give. He once again let go of a hand he'd grabbed, on the verge of breaking down. Still kneeling, he curled in on himself, the inadequacy of his own strength tearing him apart. At that precise moment, a rosy light flashed. Jiangxi waved his hand, radiance shining from his sleeve, and lifted the girl Shui Jingyang couldn't pick up onto his own sword. The buzzing sound from the resplendent Shui Huang grew even louder. Short-tempered, Jiangxi stomped on the blade and snapped. "What are you complaining for? If you've got the balls, you can stop here and wait for the fire to burn you up." Sure enough, Shui Huang went silent. It sailed ahead with Jiangxi and the other two passengers without another peep, though the slender sword really did look like it might break under the strain at any moment. Jiangxi drew near to Shui Jingyang and shot him a contemptuous glare. "What's a grown man like you crying about?" he said sharply. "If you can save them, then do it. If you can't, then don't. Why make a scene?" "Shidi," murmured Madame Wang. "Am I wrong?" Jiangxi sneered. Although he was handsome, the malicious curve of his mouth made him look terribly cold. "If you'd stayed at Guyue instead of leaving with him, how would you be so feeble now? You can't even ride your own sword. If you weren't sitting on that fan, your heroic savior of a husband would be able to rescue someone else." Madame Wang seemed stung by these words. She lowered her face and slowly closed her eyes in silence. Damn. That's a scene break. Far in the opposite direction, Mo Run had also expanded his sword to an enormous size. In addition to Chuaning, it now carried a full load of commoners from the upper cultivation realm. The refugees shivered and sniffled, watching blankly as their homes were swallowed by the sea of fire and burned to the ground. They closed their eyes and broke down in mournful sobs, their tears reflecting the flames. Mo Run remained silent in this grave atmosphere. Unlike Shui Jingyang, he hadn't sought out pointless struggles. He knew he couldn't carry anymore, so he no longer looked down at the wailing, screaming villagers rushing by beneath him. His brow furrowed slightly. "The coast is up ahead. Shisun, where should we go? Can you make it to Flying Flower Isle?" Flying Flower Isle was the island closest to Linyi in the upper cultivation realm. Mo Run nodded. "I'll make it, but I'm not too familiar with the East Sea, so I'll need to focus on navigating. Shisun, keep an eye on everyone and make sure they stay awake. It's crowded up here. If someone falls asleep, they might slip overboard." "Okay," Chuaning agreed. Mo Run pressed ahead for more than 2 hours. As dawn glimmered pale on the horizon and the sun emerged in the east, they broke through the clouds and saw a modest ring-shaped island surrounded by sparkling jade-green waters. At last, they'd arrived at Flying Flower Isle. Although this island fell under the aegis of Rufeng sect, it was remote and sparsely populated. Most of the residents were independent fishermen who lived off the sea, and there was only one family of any wealth. The islanders had anxiously spotted the huge fire engulfing Rufeng sect as a bloody glow on the horizon across the raging surf. No one knew what had happened. Many watched from their doorsteps, too afraid to sleep for fear that flames would soon blanket their own skies. By daybreak, that strange phenomenon hadn't reached their island. Instead, a vast dark sword carrying a crowd of people touched down on a shoal. At its helm was a tall and dashing young man, his cheeks stained with streaks of dried blood as if he had endured a fierce battle. Flying Flower Isle had no cultivators, and its leaders were all ordinary people. Everyone was frightened by the sight. They didn't know if this man was friend or foe, or why he had come. Why are their faces all sooty? One of the villagers muttered, peering at the assorted crowd behind Mo Run. Must have come out of that big fire. Did they fly here from Lin Yi? A broad-shouldered fisherman gathered his courage and approached the strangers. Are you all from Rufeng sect? Xisheng Peak. Mo Run passed the child in his arms to Chuaning. The toddler was too young to stay awake through the night, so Mo Run had carried him in his arms the whole way to ensure he wouldn't be crowded off the sword. This is just an obligatory pause to appreciate the tremendous growth that this man has gone through. There was some trouble at Rufeng sect, and these are all residents of Lin Yi. The apocalyptic fire was too powerful, and the sword could only carry so many. I couldn't save many of them. Mo Run had babbled out half this explanation before he looked up and saw the fisherman's bewildered expression. He realized he was speaking too quickly. How would the residents of Flying Flower Isle know anything about apocalyptic fire or the limitations of sword-riding techniques? He pressed his lips together, then said gently, I'm sorry. I'll explain the details later. He turned toward the exhausted, defeated crowd behind him. Could you first get them some food and water? One of the orphan children had come close, helpless with panic. He slowly nudged Mo Run's leg and reached up, tugging on the corner of his robe with a tiny hand. Mo Run looked down and patted him on the head. I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience, he said to the fisherman. Most of the islanders were kind-hearted, and tea and food were quickly brought over. Mo Run briefly summarized the story. They gaped in astonishment, staring blankly at the unbroken line of firelight on the horizon. Rufeng sect. Burned down? Someone said incredulously. Nengong Zhengmen is dead. He isn't dead. He was given a Ling Chi fruit and taken away, said Mo Run. What's a Ling Chi fruit? Well, that's a... Chuaning watched from the sidelines as Mo Run patiently explained to the fisherman. He didn't step forward himself. He was perfectly aware that he looked uncaring by nature, his features chilled as if by frost. It would be far better to leave Mo Run to handle the locals. We are again bowled over just by the growth and progression that it would take for the sentence. It would be far better to leave Mo Run to handle the locals. Mo Run. Mo Run. This is still, as much as even Mo Run himself draws a line and refers to them with different names, this is still Mo Wei Yu. This is still Tushin Jun. This is still that person. I'm fucked up. I can't talk about it anymore, or we'll be here all day. The child he held had begun to stir. On waking to find himself in the arms of this cold-looking stranger, he started and began to wail. Gone was all the docility he'd shown in Mo Run's arms. Chuaning glanced over at Mo Run. He was still engrossed in conversation with the locals, leaving Chuaning to fend for himself. Out of habit, he put on a stern expression and told the child, Don't cry. The child's wails rose in pitch. Daddy, Mommy, he cried over and over. I want my daddy. I want my mommy. Don't cry. Chuaning stiffly tried to comfort him. You don't cry. Low-key hilarious that he's saying don't cry, and I believe he means it in a, don't cry. But Chuaning being Chuaning, he's saying it as if he is commanding this child who has just lost his parents to not cry. You know what I mean? There's the difference. It's all in the delivery, Chuaning, and unfortunately... With one hand occupied holding the child, Chuaning lifted his other to pat him on the head. The child jerked back, avoiding his touch. His face was bright red, covered in tears and snot as he wailed, I want my mommy, I want my daddy, I want to go home. Chuaning was at his wit's end. He had never been in a position to comfort a child before and had no clue what to say. Girl? Same. He racked his brain for ways to soothe the boy, but as he sank into thought, a crease formed between his brows, giving him the air of a sword forged of steel, dark and cold as ice. The miserably howling child happened to glimpse Chuaning's expression as he kicked and struggled. So terrifying was the sight that he instantly choked on his sobs, unable to make another sound. He bit his lip, great round tears rolling from his eyes like a broken string of pearls. Suddenly, Chuaning remembered something. He untied his Changkun pouch with his free hand and pulled out a sticky rice candy. After peeling off the paper wrapper, he handed it to the child. The child hiccuped. Eyes swimming with tears, he looked silently at Chuaning, then at the candy in his hand. Like most children, his mother had raised him on folk tales. No few featured scary cultivators who snatched away disobedient children to feed them sleeping potions before refining them into pills of immortality. The child silently held back his tears and stared at Chuaning in terror. This poor man. He did better with the fish. You know? Chuaning stared blankly back, still holding up the sticky rice candy. He didn't get it. His phoenix eyes were slightly upturned, their ends long and slender. Such eyes were beautiful, but they appeared haughty and calculating when he wasn't smiling. This man is such a victim of resting bitch face, I swear to God. He's like the king of resting bitch face. Even with a slight smile, his eyes imparted the wildness of a thorny rose, prickly and arrogant, but most wouldn't appreciate such arrogance. Chuaning's face was handsome, but strangers naturally didn't find it likable, and especially not strange children. Eat this. Chuaning had watched Mo-Run produce candy to pacify several children while they were on the sword. He was only following his example. He had no idea why this candy was unacceptable. The child pressed his lips closed. He hesitated, trembling, then slowly shook his head. He didn't want to be refined into immortality pills. Don't you... Before Chuaning could say more, the child broke down sobbing in fright, his cries so heartrending that everyone around them looked over. Chuaning hadn't time to react. Still holding up the sticky rice candy, he murmured, "Like sweets?" Between the sounds of his own sobs, the child misheard Chuaning's tentative question as, "Don't you look sweet? No, why are we doing this to this poor man? Why? Why can't we let him have one nice interaction? That isn't with Mo-Run." In his little brain, he had come to the definitive conclusion that this cultivator wanted to refine him into pills, into very sweet pills of immortality, no less. He was so panicked he began bawling hysterically at the top of his lungs. Chuaning stood stiff as a board. That's the end of the chapter. We're on page 211 for chapter 173, which is called, oh no, not the chapter title, the previous chapter title, Shisun Doesn't Eat Children. Stop! This chapter, chapter 173, is called Shisun, Someone Wants to Chase Us Away. Okay. Chuaning felt like he was caught holding a hot potato. He had no idea what to do. As more and more eyes turned in his direction, his ears flushed red with embarrassment. You know what this is low-key reminding me of? This is a very Lan Wangji moment in the town with, you know, Ayuan clutching his leg and Wei Wuxian has to come fix it. That's so what this is giving to me right now in all the best ways. At that moment, a pair of hands reached out to take the child from his arms. Chuaning let out a breath of relief and turned. Mo-Run? Mo-Run shifted the child to the crook of one arm. With his free hand, he ruffled Chuaning's hair. His expression was solemn, his features weighed down faintly with melancholy after the tragedies in Linyi. Still, he made an effort to lift the corners of his lips in front of Chuaning, not wishing to show him an unhappy expression. His half-smile wasn't so gallant as usual, but it radiated an indescribable warmth. All settled with the islanders? All settled. The fire in Linyi probably won't burn itself out for a few days. We should stay in Flying Flower Isle for now. But there aren't many houses on the island, and we've brought so many people. I've asked the village elder. He said there will be room if we double up. I should have clocked it. From the second he said there aren't many houses, which I realize is about, a sentence and a half away from the mention of doubling up, but I still should have clocked it. Let's be real. The second they said aren't many houses. Mo-Run had always been good at handling such things. He had a knack for getting on well with others, and as for his looks, Chuaning remembered how the girls in Yuliang village had eyed Mo-Run when they had helped with the rice harvest. Without a doubt, Mo-Run was vastly more likable than he. Chuaning stood in silent thought for a while, unable to identify what he was feeling. He nodded. You've worked hard. No need for that with me. Mo-Run took one look at the candy, still in Chuaning's hand, and understood what had happened. With a laugh, he turned to comfort the oblivious child in his arms. Hey you, why are you crying? I want Mommy. I want Daddy. The child was so young he still walked unsteadily, yet he had already lost both parents forever to the sea of flames. Mo-Run's heart ached as he looked at the boy. He pressed his forehead to the child's and consoled him softly. Your mom and dad have some things to take care of. It'll be a few days before they can come stay with you. Be a good boy now so they'll be happy when they see you. The child gradually calmed as Mo-Run held and soothed him. Although he still sniffled from time to time, he'd stopped screaming and wailing. This is why I love redemption arcs. If I really wanted to, I could go on a whole ass long essay about why I love redemption arcs, in particular about, him. But one of the benefits that we're getting from this redemption arc in particular is that because it's a series, we have a long, I'm assuming, just go with me on this. We have a lot of time after the bulk of redeeming from a character perspective has happened. He hasn't paid his dues yet by any stretch of the imagination, but you get what I'm saying. He is now, this man, Taeshun Jun, this man is gently and considerately and compassionately comforting children. When he was who he was and did what he did in his past life. He has found compassion and empathy and softness and kindness. And I'm going to be fucked up every time they feature that in a specific way, because we know where he's come from. Just one of the reasons why redemption arcs are just good. Redemption arcs are truly something else. Bad redemption arcs make me want to set someone on fire, but that's a whole other tangent. Still holding the candy, Chuaning stood to the side and watched Mo-Run lower his head toward the tearful child. His profile was beautiful, its contours strong and crisp. Were he a watercolor painting, his brushstrokes would be vigorous and masterful, an extraordinary composition that effortlessly produced a face without equal. His features were cleanly defined, but his lashes and the eyes that peered through them were soft, like delicate leaves unfurling in spring. Chuaning's mind began to wander. Wherever, pray tell, will his mind end up? It's just a mystery. When Mo-Run leaned over to take the candy at his fingertips with his mouth, Chuaning jerked back in surprise, his eyes widening. What are you doing? The sticky rice candy was small. Mo-Run's lips had naturally brushed against Chuaning's fingers when he bit into the candy. In fact, the warm, wet tip of his tongue had even flicked the pads of Chuaning's fingertips by accident. Chuaning's whole body went numb. Relatable. His entire nervous system just shut down. Very relatable. This tiny, fleeting intimacy sent an itch scuttling down his spine, like a tender sprout breaking from its seed and pushing the impassive soil out of the way, pressing against the suffocating earth until it became soft and malleable. Her sexual metaphors, we can't talk about it. Mo-Run grinned at him with the candy between his lips and then turned to wink at the child. He tossed the candy up to catch it in his mouth, his throat bobbing as he did. "See, it's not some scary medicine," he said to the boy. "It's only sweets." Chuaning was speechless. Lost in thought, he hadn't been paying attention to Mo-Run's murmured conversation with the boy. Only now did he look back toward the child, who was staring at Mo-Run with timid, earnest eyes. "Oh, it's really candy," he finally said in a tiny, astonished voice. "Yup," Mo-Run smiled. "This cultivator Gaga is such a good person. How could he possibly kidnap you and make you into pills?" Chuaning thought it better not to respond. That's a seed break. The sky was brightening by the time Mo-Run had settled all the refugees. After the shocking occurrences of the night before, he wasn't sleepy at all. He ventured down to the shore of Flying Flower Isle by himself. The tide had receded in the morning, revealing shoals that couldn't be seen in the darkness. Now that he was alone, his worries came rushing to the surface, clouding his thoughts in a haze he couldn't dispel. He slipped off his shoes and walked slowly along the shoreline, leaving 2 crooked trails in the wet sand. He found many things about Shu Shuanglin inexplicable. For instance, here we go! It's time to theorize. Everybody hunker down. Everybody take a shot. Ooh. Everybody grab a snack. We got to get into the theories now. We got to start breaking this shit down. For instance, why did he refuse to wear shoes in the dead of winter, walking everywhere barefoot instead? Mo-Run had hidden much of his past, and people had rarely treated him with kindness. Perhaps that was why he felt he understood why Shu Shuanglin had put every effort into destroying Rufeng's sect in Jiangdong Hall, throwing the entire upper cultivation realm into chaos. The most painful thing in the world wasn't being beaten down or pushed aside. On the contrary, the most painful thing was to be betrayed by those closest to you. It was to be someone who had been innocent of wrongdoing, someone with a heart bursting with passion, who strove to become a Zhongsha of his generation, who then had everyone at the foremost competition in the cultivation world pointing at him, saying he'd stolen his techniques from his older brother, the techniques he'd poured his heart and soul into. He had been buried under this ridicule and contempt, never to rise again. After the present calamity passed, the cultivation world would inevitably have to deal with how the cards had been reshuffled. Also, that was a very deliberate, similar phrasing to exactly what Mo-Run experienced. Innocent of wrongdoing, etc., then being betrayed by the person you... Like, we get it. We get why Mo-Run understands this man. The sects that had suffered grievous injuries, whether to their reputations or their members, would all think Shu Shuanglin is truly a madman. Perhaps only Mo Wei-yu, who had once himself been a beastly, bloodthirsty murderer, would stroll alone along a peaceful, unbroken stretch of shore and consider, just what kind of person was Shu Shuanglin? Ooh. I'm going to try to summarize the essay in my head at the moment. That's what nobody wants to consider, usually. Nobody wants to consider why someone who does extremely evil things does those things. It's not easy to approach those people and those situations with empathy, which I understand. It's not easy. However, in order to stop evil deeds, you must understand the people who commit them. And in order to understand someone, you have to genuinely approach them with empathy and trying to genuinely understand them. That is such a key to society that only certain people who either have the exact experience that Mo-run is having right now, or for whatever extenuating circumstances, people approach these types of, evildoers, people who can be painted as two-dimensional villains when there is no such thing as a two-dimensional villain. And that is such a thing for me. I am so stuck on that in the real world, and it drives me just off the wall about how that's so difficult for a lot of people to do. And so it being so featured right now, right here, it really, Meat Bun and I need to be friends. We need to be friends. We need to sit down and talk. I need to have a chat with some tea with Meat Bun. I really do. Had that madman ever exhausted himself training in the Tangerine Grove when he was young and full of vigor? There's fucking tangerines again. Had he returned after nightfall, weary and satisfied, with a sweet tangerine tucked into his sleeve for his lazy brother, never knowing that this useless brother's silver tongue would later make him a pariah in the world of cultivation? Had that madman ever been engrossed in reading cultivation scrolls, earnestly loading his brush with ink to pen some naive opinion? Had he bitten the brush's handle in dissatisfaction, sinking into deep thought, never knowing that no matter how hard he worked, what awaited him was a ruined reputation, his hopes forever extinguished? Mo-run closed his eyes. The sea breeze washed over his face, the dawn light gilding his lashes. He remembered Shu Shuanglin's courtyard, farewell to 3 lifetimes. One sip of Mengpo's soup bids farewell to 3 lifetimes of memories. Could Shu Shuanglin have given his home such a name on a mere whim? There was also the question of what had happened in Mo-run's previous lifetime. Back then, Shu Shuanglin had similarly sequestered himself within Rufeng sect, and his goals ought to have been no different than they were in this one. But in that life, he had died amidst the beacon fires to save Yuangshi. Yuangshi. Shu Shuanglin had given her this name, Wangshi, to forget the past. But what was he trying to forget? Had he once tried to forget those unjust, unfair times, to forget the hatred and glory of the past, to forget each and every repulsive face in his memory? And the corpse that Shu Shuanglin had gone to such great lengths to drag out of the infinite hells, Lo Fenghua's corpse. What did he need this corpse for? In the illusion, Shu Shuanglin had told Nangong Lu that the curse on the ring could be broken by obtaining the caster's spiritual core, but it seemed, considering the outcome, that Shu Shuanglin hadn't intended to help Nangong Lu get rid of the curse at all. The Heavenly Rift, the Zhenlong Chess Formation, Rebirth. And there was the hand that had reached out of the rift at the end of those events. Mo-run vaguely felt that something wasn't right. His brows knitted tighter as he mulled it over. All of a sudden, his eyes flew open. He remembered. Years ago by Jincheng Lake, the ancient dragon Wang Yue had said before his death that mysterious person used the Heartpluck Willow's power in Jincheng Lake to practice 2 secret techniques. The first was rebirth, and the second was Zhenlong Chess Formation. There had been no mention of the space-time gate of life and death. If Wang Yue was to be believed, Shu Shuanglin only cared about learning the techniques of rebirth and the Zhenlong Chess Formation. The benefits of the latter were obvious. Controlling chess pieces would make executing his schemes much easier. But what about rebirth? Whom did he want to bring back to life? Did Shu Shuanglin bring Mo-run back and then somebody else used the gate to put Mo-run into this? Is it 2 people? After some thought, Mo-run felt there were 2 options. All right. Rongyan and Lo Fenghua. Shu Shuanglin had implied that Rongyan actually favored him in love, but had turned her back on Shu Shuanglin for reasons unknown and ultimately married his brother. But upon further consideration, Mo-run concluded that she couldn't be the one. If Shu Shuanglin were really in love with Rongyan, such that he'd do anything to revive her, why would he have murdered her only son in the previous lifetime? Besides, he had spent years by Nangonglu's side disguised as Shuanglin Elder. If he'd wanted to use the rebirth technique for the sake of Rongyan, why did he not simply prevent her from being sacrificed at Jincheng Lake in the first place? So it wasn't Rongyan. Mo-Run turned to gaze at the ocean dyed red by the rising sun, its crashing waves surging without pause. Following the sun's eastern ascent, the tide swelled, eating up the sand as Mo-Run watched. Framed between heaven and earth was a vision of golden splendor. It had to be Lo Fenghua. Mo-Run was certain of it. The person Nangongshu wanted to revive was Lo Fenghua. Rufeng's sex affairs were the opposite of simple, no matter how they appeared on the surface. They were much like the rise and fall of the sea. The broken cowries and the starfish, with their brilliant, dangerous colors, all disappeared beneath the churning waves of dawn. As the tide rolled in, the waves swept away the pebbles and spread over the shoal he was walking on. Feeling a sudden chill beneath his soles, Mo-Run looked down and saw that the surf had risen to beat against the tops of his feet. As he wiggled his shapely toes, he felt a little cold and turned to head back up to the beach for his shoes. But as soon as he looked back, he saw that Chuaning had walked over to join him. Set against a sky full of rosy clouds, he bore a mild expression and carried in one hand the shoes and socks Mo-Run had tossed upon the sand. He handed Mo-Run his shoes. "It's too cold to be walking around barefoot." Mo-Run followed him to the top of a dune and lowered himself down next to some craggy boulders on the shore. He brushed the sand from his feet and put his shoes back on. Suddenly, he felt rather comforted. Even if he never received the kind of love he wanted from Chuaning in this lifetime, Chuaning was still the best Shisun in the world. He cared for Mo-Run and looked after him. When Chuaning saw him walking barefoot, he worried Mo-Run would catch cold. "What do you make of the affair at Rufeng Sect?" Chuaning asked. "It's more complicated than it looks." "I agree." Chuaning's brow had hardly smoothed once since the events of last night. Despite the calm of the moment, his forehead still creased with worry. Seeing that Mo-Run had put on his socks and shoes, he turned again toward the vast ocean. The sun burnished the water's surface a brilliant red gold. It was hard to tell where the sunrise ended and the distant conflagration in Linyi began. "It'll be difficult to track Shu Shuanglin through the space rift," said Chuaning. "If he hides and covers his trail well, a decade could pass before we catch sight of him again." Mo-Run shook his head. "He won't wait a decade. After he recovers his strength, he'll definitely make his move." "What makes you think so?" Mo-Run explained his theory, then added, "The corpse of Lo Fenghua we saw isn't real flesh and blood. It's merely an artificial body reconstructed in the infinite hells. After it exits the ghost realm, it'll rot quickly without a supply of yin energy. I'm guessing he'll show himself again within a year, even if he's not completely prepared." Chuaning didn't reply. He had always been exceedingly cautious in both thought and action. Unlike Mo-Run, it wasn't his way to make bold conjectures regarding something so amorphous. But as he listened, he felt perhaps there was no harm in doing some guesswork. "What about that hand?" Chuaning asked. "What do you think about the hand that pulled Nangongshu away?" Mo-Run shook his head again. "I'm not well read on the first forbidden technique, so it's hard to say. I don't know." These words were untrue. Even if Mo-Run no longer wanted to lie to Chuaning, there remained some things he simply couldn't say, that he didn't dare to say. For as long as he could remember, the days of peace he had been afforded were so pitifully few, likely totaling less than a year over the course of 2 lifetimes. If someone who had spent decades adrift was suddenly sat before a bonfire with a pot of hot tea, how could he bear to step away? How could he bear to shatter this sweet dream with his own hands? So he could only say, "I don't know." But his heart stirred restlessly. Even if they knew whose hand it was, that wouldn't solve the mystery. Why hadn't the past life's Shu Shuanglin also gathered 5 elemental spiritual essences and slaughtered all who opposed him? One could assume from how things played out that Shu Shuanglin wouldn't have figured out how to resurrect Lo Fenghua at all, unless someone who was himself reborn had enticed him, led him astray. Years ago at Jincheng Lake, Xu Shuanglin's white chess piece had said to Chuaning, "If you think that I'm the only one in this world who knows the 3 forbidden techniques, then I'm afraid you won't have much longer to live." Mo Run reasoned that Xu Shuanglin must know someone who had come to this world from another. At the same time, he was fairly certain Xu Shuanglin didn't know that Mo Run himself had been reborn. Otherwise, why hadn't he revealed Mo Run's origins when they'd clashed at Rufeng Sect? He would have needed only capture some of Mo Run's memories in the scroll and expose them in the Inferno. No amount of Chu Waning's goodwill could endure that. He'd probably disown Mo Run as his disciple on the spot, and then it would be all over for Mo Wei Yu. He would never rise from such a fall again. Why hadn't Xu Shuanglin done this? There were 2 possibilities. 1, because he wasn't able to, for one reason or another. 2, because he didn't know Mo Run's secrets. And either one is perfectly likely. God damn it. In any case, there was no action Mo Run could take. He didn't have enough information. If his opponent covered their tracks carefully, Mo Run could only stand and wait for that gleaming cold knife to come at his back at any moment. Mo Run pursed his lips and lowered his thick lashes with a slight flutter. There was only so much he could do. In the past life, consumed by selfish vengeance, he had committed too many outrageous deeds. In this life, he wanted to try his best to live each day well, no matter the outcome, to repay the people to whom he owed debts, and to protect his Shisun, Shimei, Shuemong, and all of Xisheng Peak. He wanted to try his best to hold on to this brief warmth he'd never before experienced. As Mo Run was lost in thought, a fisherman rushed over. "Esteemed cultivators, bad news!" he cried. Startled, Mo Run sprang off one hand and leapt to his feet. "What happened?" "The head of our island's merchant family just returned this morning from being out at sea for several days. When the village elder explained the situation, she was awfully unhappy with how he'd handled it. She threw a fit and said she wouldn't let the children and elderly stay in the vacant rooms. She's already kicked them out. Everyone you brought is standing outside." The fisherman was a gentle soul. As he spoke, his eyes grew teary. "Those poor people. It's such a cold day, and she's not even willing to spare a coat or a blanket." The merchant also said. Chuaning also stood, his expression dark. "What else did she say?" "She also said that since those people from Linyi ate Flying Flower Isle's rations and drank Flying Flower Isle's water, she's going to charge them for every last copper, and if they can't afford it, then she'll round them up and keep them on Flying Flower Isle as slaves." Before he'd finished, Chuaning was storming off toward the center of the island in a whirl of pale blue robes. Wreck her, Chuaning! Yes! Oh my god. End of the chapter. Oh, let's go. We're on page 223 for chapter 174, which is called Shisun's Brocade Pouch. All right. Oh, read this bitch to filth. Oh, no, I can't really hit anything anymore. Damn it. Oh, yes. Oh, man. Oh, you have angered the incorrect. Ooh. I'm okay. It says, outlandish as it may seem, there are absolutely definitely people like this chick. Did we not just watch the landlords in Los Angeles try to gouge apartment prices during the fucking fires? Did we not? I'm okay. I'm all right. This section, inspiring a lot of essays, I must say. Flying Flower Isle might have been poor, but its wealthiest merchant had clearly enjoyed some success and lived in ostentatious luxury. The woman was attired in a loose satin robe spangled all over with a golden bat motif, which she wore under a coat made of top-grade snow silk from Kunlun Tashway Palace. This is an insult to bats, thank you. Her long gray streaked hair was pulled sleekly back and adorned with exquisite hairpins inlaid with kingfisher feathers and flowers made of strung-together pearls. Her eyebrows were drawn in using opulent pigment from conch shells. Her skin was powdered and oiled, and her lips were daubed with crimson. A delicate strand of pearls encircled her neck, and a pair of gleaming gold earrings, set with rubies the size of pigeons' eggs, swung ponderously from her earlobes. She was over 50 at a glance, her youth long faded, an impression reinforced by her rather stout figure and deeply lined face. With some tasteful styling, she would have looked well enough, but she clearly thought her beauty proportional to the number of luxurious items she wore. Consequently, beneath this pile of jewels, she resembled nothing so much as a miserly old turtle garnished with red chilies and green onions. She's already been wrecked. This cunning merchant owned a full half of the land on the small flying flower isle. Even the village elder didn't dare say a word against her. As the sun climbed in the sky, she strolled into... Oh, we have art! She strolled into the public square. A redwood taishi chair, God, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, carved with bats and deer, had already been set out for her. Now we're insulting the deer? She took a seat and studied the refugees from Linyi. What were you thinking? She raised heavy-lidded eyes to shoot a calculating glance at the village elder. They haven't paid a single copper, yet you've given them rooms. And there's the matter of the food. How much have they eaten? Not much. It was only leftovers from the villagers, things they couldn't finish, the village elder mumbled. The merchant snorted prissily. You still ought to charge for it. Was this rice and wheat not grown on my land? Seeing as the harvest was poor this year, I provided every family with 10 caddies of barley flour and a jar of oil from my own storehouse. Now, I don't mind feeding you. We're all islanders here. But surely you'd think twice before giving away Third Lady Sun's grain to these refugees from Linyi. Third Lady is correct, of course, the village elder smiled. But look, don't you feel pity for these little girls and old men out here in the cold? You're a kind soul, so why not let it go? The merchant opened her beady eyes wide. Let it go? How could I? Money makes the world go round, you know. The village elder was rendered speechless. And whilst I am also rendered speechless, go ahead and look at her. Yeah. You don't need to look at her for very long. We don't. How much did each family give them to eat? The merchant asked. I've asked you to tally the amount. Are you done yet? I'm sorry, I'm backing up on myself. The village elder replied helplessly. Yes, we've counted everything. He held out a small booklet for the merchant, Third Lady Sun. With a raucous jangle, Third Lady Sun raised her hand. She sported 9 colorful bracelets on her right wrist alone. Gold, silver, and jade bangles inlaid with assorted gemstones covered nearly half of her forearm. Whew. If we are in need of volume, one moment, please. While I breathe deeply. I believe I can do that really quick. Can't I? Right? Or am I making that up? No, I'm correct. All right, one moment. Okay. That should be brought up a little bit. I just don't want to make the mic start freaking out. She leafed lazily through the booklet, then closed it. After making a few quick calculations on her fingers, she pronounced, Such gluttons. All of you must have been born in the year of the pig. You've wolfed down 26 of the island's manteaux. Our manteaux are quite large, so 90 silvers more than reasonable. You drank half a vat of fresh water, which I brought over from Linyi myself. I bought each vat for 3 gold, so with the transportation cost included, I'll sell them to you for 4 gold each. That's 2 gold for half. So that'll be 2 gold, 90 silver in total. One more thing. Zhengji. The kindly-looking woman whom she had addressed jumped and looked up. Ah, Third Lady. Third Lady Sun smiled. The manteaux you make are so delicious because you add lard to the dough. That must be accounted for. I only use a tiny dab of lard for 10 manteaux. How would I account for such a small amount? What's so hard about that? 10 manteaux, a dab of lard, I'll charge 1 copper coin for the lot. That's very fair. The other woman stared silently. So that's 2 gold, 90 silver, and 1 copper altogether, said Third Lady Sun. Plus, you're all sleeping in rooms on my land. The rooms might not be mine, but the land most assuredly is. You slept for an hour, so that'll be 70 coppers per person. She turned to the attendant next to her. How many refugees are there here? Third lady, there are 49 in total. That's not right. Weren't there 51 before? Where are the other two? Before her words had faded, she heard a low voice answer, right here. Oh, I'm so ready. I'm so ready. Although Chuaning wore robes of silvery blue instead of his customary white, he looked as frostily imposing as ever. His elegant phoenix eyes were bright and clear, his pupils haughty and cold as an unsheathed dagger. Third Lady's son was a commoner, but cultivators didn't frighten her. She had been a businesswoman for most of her life, fussing over and haggling for every coin. But all her operations were above board, and she had always steered clear of evildoers. She said evenly, I see you're a cultivator, so it's no wonder you don't need to sleep. You're the one who rescued these people and brought them here, right? You've come just in time. Hurry up and hand over the money. Third Lady, these two aren't from Rufeng sect, the village elder said in a low voice. They're cultivators from Xisheng Peak. You needn't be so... I don't care what sect they're from. I answered a coin, not people. Chuaning glanced at the shivering refugees huddled together in the cold. With a wave of his hand, he brought down a red gold barrier to keep out the chill. Then he turned. How much are you asking? 2 gold, 93 silver, and 430 copper. Loathsome Third Lady's son might be, but they had nowhere else to go. Chuaning understood that if he crossed her, the consequences would fall not on him, but on those he'd brought here. Face sullen, he fished his money bag from his chankun pouch and tossed it to her. There's about 80 gold in there. Most of his money was still with Shui Jingyang. He didn't have much on him at all. We'll stay for 7 days or so. See if that's enough. It's not. Third Lady's son would never lift a finger herself. She summarily passed the bag to her assistant to count the money. 80 gold will cover your stay for 3 days at most, and I haven't even accounted for the cost of food. You... If Shenjun isn't convinced, allow me to show you an itemized bill. A businesswoman knows money. We can go through it line by line if you like. By then, Mo-Run had hurried over. He didn't have much money on him either. With both their finances pooled, they barely had enough to cover 4 days of food and lodging for 51 people. Third Lady's son took the coins and drew her vivid red lips up into a smile. You can stay for 4 days. After that, I don't care whether the inferno's gone out. If you don't have the money, you need to go. That's a scene break. Ooh, we're playing the long game here. Okay. In the interest of reducing their expenses, Chuaning skipped dinner that night. He cast a messenger Haitong over the sea in an attempt to contact Shui Jingyang, then returned to the little cottage he'd been assigned. The dwelling was even cruder than the one he'd stayed in during the harvest at Yuliang village. Because there wasn't much vacant housing on the island, the refugees were all crammed together. Chuaning wasn't accustomed to sharing a room with strangers, so he doubled up with Mo-Run. The humble cottage's candle had been lit, but Mo-Run wasn't inside. Where he had gone off to, Chuaning didn't know. Chuaning shrugged off his outer robe. It was a luxurious garment, to be sure, but the material really wasn't any finer than the everyday white he favored, and it was by now stained with blood and ash from the Apocalyptic Fire. He had filled a wooden bucket with hot water and was about to start washing when the door creaked. Chuaning looked up at Mo-Run. Where'd you go? It's late. Mo-Run stepped into the room with a woven bamboo food box tucked into his robe to protect against the chill wind. He met Chuaning's gaze, the tip of his nose red from the cold, and grinned. I went to Third Lady's manor to beg for food. Chuaning stared at him. You went to beg for food? Just kidding, Mo-Run said, but I did bring some dinner. What is it? Mantou. Mo-Run looked apologetic, and a bowl of fish soup and red braised pork. No dessert, unfortunately. That Third Lady's son was staring me down, and all the villagers are scared of her, so no one dared give me more. I went to her manor and traded my silver dagger for this. Chuaning frowned. That woman is heartless. I remember that dagger. There's a spiritual stone set in the hilt. How did you get so little for it? It wasn't just this. I haggled for 51 meals, one for everyone. I watched the kitchen send them out, Mo-run said with a smile. So don't worry about the others, Shisun. Just eat up. Chuaning really was quite hungry. He sat at the table and applied himself to the hot fish soup before nibbling on the mantou and braised pork. Third Lady's son was a stingy woman, so the meat was both meager and greasy, not at all to Chuaning's taste. But the steamed bun dipped in soup wasn't bad at all. After he finished one, he started on his second. Mo-run glanced at the steaming bucket of water. Shisun, you're doing laundry? He asked. If it's just your outer robe, I can wash it for you. There's no need. I can do it myself. It's fine. I wanted to do my laundry anyway, so this is perfect, said Mo-run. He stepped over to the bed to grab the clothes he'd changed out of earlier and hauled the wooden bucket outside. As he looked up at the bright moon in the courtyard, Mo-run wondered how Shui-meng, his uncle, and the rest were doing, and where Yo-wang-shi and Nengong-so were now. He gazed out to sea, toward the great inferno still surging like a bloody tide, smoke scorching the heavens. He wondered about Song Chutong, and also about that other person, the one for whom he harbored such bone-deep hatred that he'd slaughtered every soul in Rufeng sect in the past life. Both had probably lost their lives to the sea of flames. Mo-run heaved a sigh and set the thought aside. He put down the wooden bucket, added some cold water from the cistern, and rolled up his sleeves to wash the clothes. When it came to assembling automatons or writing scrolls, Chuaning was thorough and methodical to a fault, but it all went to shambles as soon as he attempted such domestic tasks as laundry or cooking. For instance, Mo-run always checked his own pockets and Chang-kun pouch before soaking his wet clothes to ensure nothing important got wet. But Chuaning often forgot this mundane step. Mo-run mutely fished item after random item out of Chuaning's robes. What was all this? A high-tongue handkerchief. Okay, fairly normal. An assortment of medicines, also reasonable. A handful of candy. Mo-run was at a loss. Upon closer inspection, he realized they were the milk candies he'd given Chuaning back in Yuliang village. How hadn't he finished them yet? Gee, I don't know. Maybe he's treasuring them for all time. He continued rummaging. A second later, Mo-run flinched. An exploding talisman. His face went ashen with terror as he lifted the damp paper talisman out of the water. How careless could Chuaning be? He'd just stuck this exploding talisman in his pocket without any safeguard? Even if the chances of it catching fire and self-detonating were slim, it was still appallingly risky. Was this his idea of a joke? Mo-run frowned and hurriedly sifted through Chuaning's clothes again. After extracting all the exploding talismans, freezing talismans, and soul-soothing talismans, he discovered that Chuaning had even left behind the Rising Dragon talisman, with that tiny dragon drawing. If he hadn't checked, these paper talismans would have had a nice long soak, and most of them would have been ruined. Seriously, what was he to do with this man? Mo-run shook his head in exasperation and resolved never again to allow his Shisun to do his own laundry. It's the domesticity. It's the being married before you're even together. Just then, a small object, the soft white of lotus root, slipped from an inner pocket. Distracted, Mo-run assumed it was yet another spiritual talisman. He picked it up and glanced at it briefly. That glance was enough to stop him in his tracks. What he held was an old brocade pouch embroidered with flowers of the silk tree, their once brilliant petals dimmed with age. Mo-run felt at once incredulous and bemused. This object seemed vaguely familiar. He must have seen it somewhere long ago. Must have seen it somewhere before, long enough ago that he couldn't immediately recall where or when. As Mo-run rubbed the little brocade pouch, dark eyebrows knitting together, light and shadow chased each other through his eyes. Memories flitted past as he sought those blooming flowers amidst the rushing tides of time. The fine fabric, slightly cool against his fingers, had faded over the course of the years. He peered at it closely as he turned it over in his hand, but the memory eluded him. Fearing something dangerous lurked inside, another exploding talisman, perhaps. He opened the pouch to take a look. He was struck dumb by what he saw. It was a lock of hair. No, upon closer examination, it was 2 locks of hair, tied and coiled together, inextricably linked. Despite the passage of time, they had managed to remain intertwined, keeping each other company. What looked like a singular piece was actually 2 black locks, long loath to part. Hair? Moron's heart fluttered as realization dawned. A brocade pouch, he muttered. A brocade pouch with silk tree flowers. Suddenly he remembered. The memory burst to life like fire in his heart, setting his whole chest aflame. His eyes flew wide in astonishment. The ghost mistress. He remembered. The golden boys and jade maidens from Butterfly Town, sharing a cup of wine, the mass ceremony, cutting their hair in oath, entwining their hair in union. He remembered. Henceforth 2 souls shall be united, through heaven or hell never to part. He remembered. He remembered. Before Butterfly Town's ghost mistress, he and Chuaning were married in the ghost ceremony. The golden boys and jade maidens had cut from each a lock of hair and placed them together in a silk tree flower brocade pouch, which Chuaning had accepted. This right here was that very brocade pouch. But how? Moron's ears rang, his heart pounded. He was mystified. How could this be? He clutched the brocade pouch, his hand trembling minutely. An unsettled light leapt within his eyes, flashing between amazement, shock, disbelief, confusion, ecstasy, even sorrow. Shisun. Chuaning. Why would he have kept this? That's the end of the chapter. Stop right now. Meat Bun, I swear to God. No. We don't like her. We don't like her around these parts. We just don't. We do not. We dislike greatly. More and more with each passing day, actually. We do not like this woman. We're on page 235 for chapter 175, which is called Shisun, Do You Like Me? And it's already a little bit after 4, so we're going to go ahead and take our break. I'm going to try to keep it to a short one today so we can have the most time as possible, because actually we'll be reading a little more than 50 pages today. And in order to fit that all in without keeping you here all day, we're going to kind of have to speed through it. Did I remember this in the beginning when I was going on really long diatribes that did nothing but soak up time? No, but we're here now. So I'll be back in just a few minutes. Please enjoy the Gaywatch break room. In the meantime, I'm gonna go get some more tea for what the hell is about to happen. Okay? Okay. All right. Uh-huh. And we're back. We're back. We're back. We're here. She's done, you know, we still don't like her, but she has done a job in providing enough fraught almost moments to make you genuinely unsure if any given impending moment is actually the moment or just another averted moment. So who knows? Who can say what, if any, kind of out she may take here? We are on page 235 for chapter 175, which is called Shisun, Do You Like Me? I could have sworn I had something to mention before we started, but this whole pouch thing has really thrown me for a loop. We finish this volume, not today. We finish it on Tuesday. So we have one more stream left after this before we finish this volume. Look at it. This is how far we are. And then on next Thursday, so 1 week from today, is when we start the Captive Prince trilogy. And we read it all the way through. We're doing all three of the trilogy at once, plus probably Summer Palace, maybe, depending on how it goes. Which is kind of, it's the secret third thing, you know, for the trilogy. It's some additional stuff. But we're going to read that all the way through. And we start that on May 1st. So we start that next Thursday because May 1st is 5 years of Gaywatch. And that is how I choose to celebrate, because Captive Prince is a trilogy that means a lot to me. And it's been a while since I've read it. Like, it's been years since I've read it. So this is all very fortuitous. We are also having a special little live stream before that. So on May 1st, we start Captive Prince at 3 p.m. But a little bit before that, at 1:30 p.m., I will be going live, anywho, to answer some questions, have a chat, talk about 5 years at Gaywatch, but kind of mostly answer questions. So bring your questions, bring some snacks, bring a nice, like, chill vibe, and we are going to rein in 5 years of Gaywatch. So that's what we're doing next week. But for now, we have obviously the stream today, and then we get to finish this volume on Tuesday, whatever that means. So, Chuaning was starting in on the last manteau when the door swung open behind him. Murun entered, carrying a pile of objects that he placed on the bed. Shisun, there were some talismans and other things you didn't take out of your outer robe. I'll put them here for you, Murun said. Without looking up, he turned and left again. Truth be told, he really didn't have the courage to ask Chuaning about the brocade pouch. No, I assumed. I didn't think we were just going to walk right in and have a direct conversation about this. Why would we do that? Not these two. They don't do that. For a variety of, you know, deeply in character reasons that we've been exploring for the past 4.5 volumes. No matter Chuaning's response, he couldn't imagine a conversation would be anything but unbearably awkward. And this was to say nothing of Chuaning's thin face and Mo Run's own clumsy way with words. What was he to do if he put his foot in his mouth and upset Chuaning? Mo Run pursed his lips. His dark eyes glinted and flashed, but his thoughts were scattered and confused. Like a bolt from the blue, an unspeakably outrageous idea popped into his head. Could it be that Chuaning actually liked him? You know what this is giving? You know what this is giving? And since this is also dark fiction, the odds that any of you have actually seen this is not zero, so I will go ahead and say it. This is deeply giving season 3 of Hannibal, where even like towards the end of season 3 of Hannibal, so towards the end of the show, after everything that's happened in that show, and if you know, you know. If you don't, go watch it. After everything, Will Graham has the audacity to look at another character and genuinely ask, is Hannibal in love with me? And you just want to, well, throw him off a cliff. But it's the same feeling right now. The same, exact same. Oh, God, another series has done it to me again. All right. Shocked by the sheer audacity of this fancy, Mo Run rapidly shook his head. No way, he mumbled. Here was a perfect illustration of the inability to see the forest for the trees. Mo Run was far too deep in the woods. ADHD relatable right there. Had this brocade pouch belonged to someone Mo Run didn't care for at all, a random female cultivator, for example, he would have divined her feelings in an instant. Who would keep a brocade pouch with a lock of another's hair entwined with their own and for so many years unless they liked him? In principle, it was a very straightforward scenario, but because Chuaning was involved, Mo Run doubted himself at every turn. People were like this. The more they cared for someone, the more prone their imagination was to run wild. Write it down, that's dead-ass true. Normally intelligent people would become fools and have no idea what to do with themselves. A single glance from the object of their affection would send them into deep obsession for a day or more, and a moment's silence would prompt them to embark on a painstaking investigation into the meaning hidden within. Stop reading me to filth. Mo Run would compulsively overthink the simplest of situations, carefully tasting each and every detail in search of the most elusive favors. I'm reminded of a Lorde lyric, which is funny because she just dropped a new single. I'm reminded of a Lorde lyric from I can't remember where, which says, I overthink your punctuation use. And that was also a deeply relatable moment. Mo Run would compulsively overthink the simplest of situations, Had he gotten it wrong? Had he misunderstood? Had Chuaning merely forgotten to throw the thing out? That's actually a halfway decent question. Shit! The problem was so elementary that anyone could have figured it out with their big toe, but Mo Run was stuck on it for ages. Worries filled his wandering thoughts as he absent-mindedly washed the clothes in the bucket. He scrubbed and scrubbed, the water growing colder and colder as his heart burned hotter and hotter. Mo Run found himself staring up at the cottage. Rich golden candlelight shone through the paper of the window in its squat frame of aged wood. The flame flickered, dark one moment, bright the next, not unlike the tender shoot that had sprouted in Mo Run's heart, shivering and swaying. If Chuaning really liked him... Once, Mo Run had been the unabashedly thick-skinned Emperor Tashanjun. I was informed that I was saying Tashanjun incorrectly, and it's actually more like Ta. I'm still having to get used to it, though. Give me a second. But now, even this fleeting thought was enough to make him blush. He felt hot, his throat dry. It was a thirst no water could slake. The only thing that could ease the parched heat within him was the man inside that room. Only the sweetness of his mouth could soothe Mo Run and bring him a moment of respite. Only the very man Mo Run had sworn up and down to cherish, protect, and respect. Respect. Mo-Run felt his burning chest had been splashed with water. He had always brandished this word to warn and rebuke himself whenever his ardent desire for Chuaning threatened to overmaster him. But things were different tonight. The brocade pouch was like a bundle of dry pine kindling thrown onto the fire in his heart, fuel for his wildest fantasies. Respect. You need to respect him, Mo-Run chanted to himself. There are lots of ways to respect people. Hey, I'm just throwing this out there. There's a lot of ways to respect someone. But the words were as futile as trying to douse a burning cart of firewood with a single cup of water. Those words had once quelled his yearnings. Now those same thoughts roared up into towering flames, instantly transforming that cup of cold water into curls of steam that misted his vision. Mo-Run found, much to his surprise, that this incantation of "you need to respect him" was finally rendered completely, utterly ineffective. Inside, Chuaning polished off the last manteau. Thinking to wipe his fingers, he crossed to the bed and plucked the high-tongue handkerchief out of the pile of odds and ends. He sighed, inwardly lamenting his lousy memory. He couldn't even remember to take this stuff out of his robes before washing them. Now he'd made a fool of himself in front of Mo-Run, and who knew if he... Before he'd completed the thought, he spied a fine red cord peeking out from beneath a small mound of talismans. His heart stuttered. He reached for the red cord to take a closer look, but his hand froze midway, stalled by fear. After a moment's hovering, he drew his hand back and slipped his fingers beneath his lapels to check the spot right next to his heart. His face instantly fell. The silk tree flowered brocade pouch was missing. Chuaning's expression was unsightly. He stood in shock for a beat as he realized what had happened. The interior pocket of the formal robes Shui Jingyang had commissioned was slightly angled. Chuaning had always kept the brocade pouch from the ghost ceremony within his innermost robe, but he had worried it might accidentally slip out with the angle and how smooth the robe's texture was. Thus, he had removed it to the pocket of his outer robe. He considered the heap of oddments with mounting panic. All the candy and other miscellaneous little items were piled on top, with the talismans stacked beneath. The red cord was right at the bottom. That it was so obviously hidden made it all the more conspicuous, as though the person who tried to hide it was saying, "I didn't see it. I didn't see anything at all," while waving his hands and blushing furiously. After a lengthy silence, Chuaning reached for the end of the cord. He held his breath, clinging to his last thread of hope, and tugged the brocade pouch free from the jumble of talismans. Ah, of course. The red cord of the brocade pouch had been tampered with. The knot was not the one he always used. Try as Chuaning might to stay calm, his fair skin flushed, and his ears turned so red they looked ready to drip blood. He loosened the cord and opened the pouch. The 2 locks of inky black hair had lain entwined for so many years, 2 like the hidden feelings that had wound round his heart just as long. Now they tumbled starkly into the warm yellow candlelight, soft and supple in his hand. Mo-Run had seen his brocade pouch, and afterward he had buried it under all this random junk, obviously trying to pretend he'd seen nothing at all. This knowledge set off an explosion in Chuaning's head. His heart pounded and his mind raced madly, his face burning like red-hot coals. What to do? Had Mo-Run realized the feelings he had tried so hard to hide? He was done for. Mo-Run liked Ximing-Jing. If Mo-Run discovered what Chuaning felt for him, he would definitely be scared off. Would the newly gentle and warm relationship that had sprung up between them then crumble? Chuaning's thoughts were a mess as he clutched the brocade pouch. It was a long time before he was able to calm himself. He could only hope Mo-Run hadn't figured it out. He gambled on his established reputation of being clear of heart and free of desire, and hoped Mo-Run hadn't realized anything at all. When someone's years-long crush was discovered by the object of their affection, it would normally be cause for joy, a kind of liberation. That wasn't quite the case for Chuaning. He was 32 already, and long since used to being alone. Mo-Run and Shimei were in the most shining years of their youth, but Chuaning had spent those years of his life in solitude. It never occurred to him, now that he was in his 30s, that any chance remained for him to find true love and companionship. After all, to begin a relationship, one would first inevitably have to divulge their feelings, yet this came with the terrible, grievous risk of rejection. The mortifying ordeal of being known. Chuaning tucked the brocade pouch away. He paced back and forth in the room, eventually coming to a stop before the bronze mirror. He gazed up into it. Years of disuse had left a thick layer of dust on the mirror's surface, and he could only make out a blurry outline. He reached up and wiped his hand across the mirror. Amidst the grime appeared a face that was far from perfect. The corner of his eye landed exactly on a scratch in the mirror. Chuaning blinked at himself. Hideous. He suddenly felt so annoyed, so disappointed with the person looking back at him. Why do I look like this? Here's this. I mean, ever since, and I forget where I saw this, but ever since I saw some talk show or something of this girl who was like, she was in her 20s, definitely. This young woman who was like objectively beautiful. She was very traditionally like stunning and gorgeous. And she talked about her dysmorphia, her body dysmorphia. Like she looked in the mirror and she was disgusted. And it was ruining her life in a big way because body dysmorphia is no joke. But I saw this when I must have been around her age, but potentially a little bit younger. And it was like something about the way she talked about it really hammered home for me that traditionally attractive people are not just magically immune to being cripplingly insecure, but or also, having dysmorphia. That's like the point of dysmorphia, really. You are not accurately, or not even accurately, you know what I mean? You're not, you cannot see yourself that way. No matter what you look like, you cannot see yourself that way. It's a very complicated thing. And that's exactly what this reminds me of. Because Chuaning has been described as, a very, like, exceptionally beautiful man. Like, especially by, like, Mo Run, who has found him attractive. But with the way he's been described, he is much more traditionally handsome than he perceives. And that's a complicated and sad thing. That's not just, a traditionally attractive person just fishing for compliments or something. That's a legit thing that I've encountered before. One of my best friends, actually my best friend from college, was an absolutely beautiful girl and had the same thing, the same problem, the same issue. And it's again, we'd be here all day. Mo Run, he knew, liked men who were young, gentle, and pretty. Chuaning managed to be precisely none of these things. His face was unlined, but he couldn't hide the weight time's passage had wrought upon his features. He had always been mature beyond his years, and now he had not a hint of youthful passion remaining. Yeah, but the new strike is like, never underestimate competency kink, okay? Especially competency kink of like a full adult man. That's powerful. Not that he knows this, but that's powerful. I might be telling on myself a little bit, but that's powerful. How could he have the nerve to be with a young person, his own disciple no less? If word got out, never mind his own reputation, it would be deeply embarrassing for Mo Run and Xisheng Peak. And there was Shuming Jing, whose incomparable loveliness had only grown during the 5 years Chuaning had spent in slumber. Even when he wasn't smiling, his gently curved eyes were like luminous peach blossoms. Chuaning looked again at his reflection. The face looking back was surly and arrogant. Between the two of them, only an idiot would pick Chuaning. Honey, we have got to get him some therapy. Chuaning inspected the hazy yellow mirror. If he could reverse the passage of time and induce this ugly face in the mirror to fall in love while in his 20s, he might have harnessed the vitality of his youth to rashly confess his feelings. Even if he came out worse for wear, he would have survived. But he was now over 30. His youth had fled, which is, I mean, ancient times, so different. But it's always funny to me. It's been funny to me since I was Mo Run's age to hear society refer to people who were Chuaning's age as like, oh, their youth is gone. That is so just fundamentally untrue. That's just so not true. And like, obviously, if it was true, like, no big deal, because we put way too much of an emphasis on youth. But like, it's not. It's just so funny. It's just such a... Where even was I? Hello? His youth had fled, leaving behind only his wretched, wary, unkind self, along with a ferocious face that frightened children to tears. Well, that was a misunderstanding. Mo Run was in the best years of his life, and Shumei was a beauty who could topple nations. Oh, honey! As for Chuaning, he was just some unpleasant man who would never be young again. He didn't dare ask for anything. He only wanted to hide. He only wanted to continue like this, slow and steady. He wouldn't dare entertain thoughts of reciprocation. If he could be allowed to quietly harbor these unrequited feelings, to like someone in secret, to treat that person well in his role as his Shisun, then that would be enough, he thought. He would be quite satisfied. He's entirely too relatable. This is far too fucking relatable, Chuaning. I already loved you, man. Don't do this to me. A creak sounded behind him. Chuaning didn't turn. Within the bronze mirror, he saw Mo Run enter the cottage, carrying a wooden bucket. Neither spoke. The mirror was hazy, so Chuaning could only make out a tall figure standing in the entryway. He couldn't tell what expression Mo Run wore or make out the shades of emotion within his gaze. Despite admonishing himself repeatedly to remain calm, Chuaning couldn't stop his heartbeat from quickening. He didn't want Mo Run to see his look of embarrassment, so he untied his ponytail and held the ribbon between his teeth. Dipping his head, he made a show of putting his hair back up before the mirror. Chuaning thought himself very clever. With the ribbon in his mouth, he had the perfect excuse to avoid greeting Mo Run, so... Fingers brushed the back of Chuaning's ear. He froze instantly in place. Though he tried to suppress it, a small shudder rippled through him. Chuaning was unaccustomed to physical contact to begin with. And here was Mo Run, touching his ear, Mo Run's large, rough palm, skimming the tender skin of his earlobe. Though it lasted but an instant, the contact made Chuaning's back tingle all the way up his spine. He looked studiously at the ground. If he raised his head now, he feared Mo Run would see that his face was unusually flushed, even through the dimness of the room and the haziness of the bronze mirror. He bit down on the hair ribbon and mastered himself with great effort. "You're done with the laundry." Mo Run's voice was low and very slightly husky. Chuaning felt him lean in. "Nobody move." "Everybody shut up." Hold my hand. You guys gotta hold my hand. Hold. Everybody hold hands. Everybody hold fucking hands. Okay. Just in case. All right? Just in case. We still don't know. But just, everybody shut up. All right? Chuaning felt him lean in. The chill air lingered on Mo Run, but it couldn't mask the sharply masculine scent radiating from him. It was enough to make Chuaning's head spin. His thoughts blurred, and slowed to a stop. Mo-Run brushed back the stray wisps of hair at Chuaning's temple. Shisun, just now, His words faltered. Chuaning waited. What was Mo-Run trying to say? As he held the ribbon between his teeth, eyes downcast, his heartbeat seemed to stall. Whatever Mo-Run wanted to say seemed too difficult to speak aloud. After a pause, he changed the subject. Forget it, it's nothing. Are you putting your hair back up? It's late. Chuaning didn't reply. His singular thought was that Mo-Run was standing entirely too close to him. It was too hot. Are you going out? Mo-Run asked. No, I was just going to wash the dishes, replied Chuaning. I'll help. My hands work fine, Chuaning shot back. Mo-Run laughed awkwardly behind him, as if he didn't know what else to say. Shisun's hands work fine, but they're clumsy sometimes. I'm worried you'll break a dish. Chuaning couldn't muster a response. Noticing his silence, Mo-Run thought he was annoyed. He reined in his smile and said earnestly, The water's cold outside. Remember to bring out some warm water and mix it in. The hum of Chuaning's reply sounded like both and humph, unclear yet undeniably pleasant to the ear. The sound roused that tender sprout in Mo-Run's chest, urging it to grow faster. His throat bobbed slightly, and his shadowy gaze landed on the sliver of pale neck that showed over Chuaning's collar when he lowered his head. He felt that same vexatious thirst and swallowed on reflex, though he did so as quietly as possible, not wanting Chuaning to hear. Mo-Run took a deep breath and forced a smile. This mirror is so blurry. It hasn't been used for a long time. How can Shisun even see himself? Give me the ribbon. I'll comb your hair for you. With the length of lilac silk still held between his teeth, Chuaning had no chance to demur before Mo-Run grabbed the ribbon. It would be too strange to keep biting down on it, so he resentfully let go and allowed Mo-Run to help him tie his ponytail. Feigning indignance, he snorted, Do you even know how? If you don't tie it right, I'll have to redo it anyway. Shisun, have you forgotten? At Peach Blossom Springs, I always tied your hair for you. Chuaning fell silent at once. His stint as Shiasini was a humiliating piece of his past that he had no desire to revisit. He closed his eyes and scowled, letting Mo-Run comb out his hair. But with every stroke, Mo-Run's palm lightly brushed against his ear. He felt horribly uncomfortable, his scalp numb and his throat dry, and his scowl grew deeper. Are you just about finished? Mo-Run's chest rumbled with a deep laugh. Oh, you're always so impatient. Don't worry, I'm almost done. His voice seemed even closer than before, like it was coming from just behind Chuaning's ear. Chuaning found himself clenching his fists within his sleeves. Perhaps it was his delusion. He felt that Mo-Run's breathing was a little heavy, like a wild beast readying itself before it pounced on its prey. Chuaning had the prickling sensation of being watched, as if a ravenous tiger crouched behind him, preparing at any moment to pin him against the bronze mirror, tear open his throat, and lap up the blood that spilled from his veins. Such perceptions could at times be startlingly accurate. It was just that Chuaning's self-esteem was too low for him to credit his senses. How was he to know that if only he looked up, he would see Mo-Run's eyes in the mirror, bright yet shadowed, desire and reason clashing within, full of sparks and smoke? As Mo-Run grasped the sleek silk ribbon, the clear-headed part of him commanded his body to diligently tie up Chuaning's hair. But the darker half of his soul was gripped by fretful thoughts. What am I doing, tying a ribbon? But this ribbon is being tied in the wrong place. He felt that he should be shoving Chuaning against the dilapidated dressing table, using the ribbon to blindfold him with one hand while gripping his chin with the other. He should be kissing him voraciously, pressing him down to taste the sweetness of his mouth and sucking on the soft tip of his tongue. Clearly, he should be nuzzling at Chuaning's ear and licking the tiny mole behind it. He should be breathing heavily against the shell of his ear and asking softly, "Chuaning, my dear Shisun, why did you keep that brocade pouch? Waning, do you like me?" So painful was his yearning that he felt his heart would split open. His blood coursed scaldingly hot through his veins as his eyes burned red. End of the chapter. That's a curious title. We're on page... Oh, I gotta straighten up. Oh, that had me. Oh, loosen the shoulders. Everybody take a second to relax, because I glimpsed like the first half of the first sentence of the next chapter, and we haven't skipped any time. We're still there. So just everybody take a second. Whew. All right. We're on page 247. Did I already say this? Who can know for sure? We're on page 247 for chapter 176, which is called Shisun, Why Don't You Buy Me? Which is curious because, as provocative as it is, the context is more elusive even than usual. So, who fucking knows? All right. Okay. You know, since we're still in this moment, we're still holding hands, by the way. You and I, spiritually, emotionally, metaphorically, we are holding hands right now. Still. That's why my arm is still outstretched. We are still holding hands, just so you know. Just so you're aware. I got you, all right? All right. With his ponytail securely tied, Chuaning went out to do the dishes. There were only 3 bowls, but he stayed outside for quite a long time. Mo-Run sat on the bed, restless with anxiety. He unwittingly dug his fingers into the crevice between the mattress and the wall, glancing at the window from time to time. What do I do? He wondered. How am I supposed to sleep tonight? This question might have seemed basic, but it was actually impossible to answer. Mo-Run couldn't be sure of Chuaning's feelings. As for himself, lust and rationality dueled in his heart, the flames of war roaring sky high. At that moment, the curtain lifted and Chuaning stepped across the threshold, wreathed in the outside chill and holding 3 freshly washed bowls. When he glanced at Mo-Run sitting on the edge of the bed in the flickering candlelight, there was some subtle emotion in his gaze. But he lowered his lashes a second later, such that Mo-Run couldn't get a clear look before Chuaning settled at the table with his back to him. Shisun's not going to bed yet. The instant the words left his mouth, he felt he'd blundered. He sounded like a desperate man beseeching his lover to come to bed for the night. Is that not accurate? Chuaning didn't turn his head. I've still got some things to take care of, he said mildly. Go to sleep first if you're tired. I'm not tired either, said Mo-Run. What does Shisun need to do? I'll help. You can't help. I want to make some sound recording high tongue blossoms, Chuaning replied. With a graceful twirl of his fingers, a high tongue glowing with golden light blossomed in his hand. He placed it carefully near the edge of the table. These blooms were made from Chuaning's spiritual energy and could record and transmit a short spoken message, a secret technique of his own invention that none could imitate. Mo-Run was puzzled. He came to the table and pulled out a chair, spinning it around to sit backward. The gays really can't sit right. His sturdy arms rested against its back, his chin pillowed on top. What's Shisun planning to do with these? Sell them. Huh? At the note of surprise in Mo-Run's voice, Chuaning cast him a dispassionate glance. We can't afford to stay on Flying Flower Isle for 7 days. Isn't Third Lady Sun a businesswoman? Then I'll do business with her. These are golden, sound-recording high tongue blossoms that stay fresh all year round. You saw how she's dripping with gold and silver from head to toe. She clearly likes things that glitter. I'll sell them on the street tomorrow and see if she bites. Mo-run couldn't help but laugh. Shisun is going to sell flowers? This comes with a footnote. Also a euphemism for prostitution. That really recontextualizes a certain character from Final Fantasy VII who's a flower girl. Anyway, Chuaning's expression shifted slightly. Perhaps because she didn't want to associate himself with those tawdry ladies selling white orchids in alleyways, he corrected Mo-run sternly. They're blossoms made from spiritual energy. They don't count as flowers. I'll go with you to sell them tomorrow. Chuaning didn't reply. Bowing his head in concentration, he rapidly conjured a few more flowers before replying sulkily, Do whatever you want, as long as you don't find it too embarrassing. Why would it be embarrassing? Mo-run plucked a flower off the table and sniffed it. The blossom was light in his hand and fragranceless, its glow singularly graceful. The golden light washed over his handsome face and dark lashes as he smiled. I imagine Third Lady Sun will weep at the chance to buy these from Shisun. How much are you selling them for? Even 100 blossoms don't require much spiritual energy. How about 3 for a copper coin? Mo-run stared at him without a word. Chuaning glanced at him again and frowned slightly. Is that too much? He asked, hesitant. Mo-run sighed. Rather than answer the question directly, he said, Shisun shouldn't name a price tomorrow. Allow me. Why? I made the flowers. I should set the price. 3 for a copper coin. Mo-run waved 3 fingers in front of Chuaning, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Hey! Heaven Official's Blessing fans get to take a drink. Shisun, you're the Beidou immortal, and these are your night glow high tongue blossoms, prized throughout the entire cultivation realm. You're going to let them go, 3 for a copper coin. No one's ever asked me for them. They're pretty enough and good for transmitting messages, but not otherwise useful. I think the price is fair. Honey! Mo-run laughed in exasperation. Then why don't you sell them all to me? I'll give you the money right now. Chuaning's hand stilled. Brilliant golden petals floated down as a half-formed high tongue blossom was severed from his spiritual power. He held out his hand and responded calmly, All right, deal. Finding himself speechless, Mo-run reached for his money bag before remembering that the island's conniving merchant had already squeezed every last coin from both him and Chuaning. He looked up, a bit embarrassed, and met Chuaning's answering gaze. There was a barest hint of a smile on Chuaning's face. Mo-run felt doubly awkward. Shisun already knew I didn't have any money left, he muttered. Chuaning was amused. You're the one who boasted and said you'd buy if I were selling. Mo-run swallowed the rest of his sentence. He suddenly felt that this phrase was rather ambiguous. What Chuaning should have said was, you'd buy if I were selling flowers, but he'd lazily left off the last bit. It made it sound like Mo-run wanted to spend his money on the man before him. But the title of the chapter is Shisun, why don't you buy me? Huh. Mo-run's heartbeat picked up speed. He didn't dare meet Chuaning's eyes, afraid his Shisun would detect the disgraceful intent in his own. But when his gaze caught on Chuaning's hand, palm up as he waited, he discovered that those fingertips were red and chapped from the cold. When Chuaning had been washing the bowls outside, he had stubbornly kept at it until the warm water had turned freezing. Without thought, almost out of habit, Mo-run grabbed the hand outstretched on the table. Chuaning jumped. He'd been feigning calm as he'd held out his hand, but instead of any coin, his fingers found themselves pressed between a pair of warm, broad palms. Those palms were just the right temperature, but he jerked his hand away like he'd been burned by a hot iron. What are you doing? Mo-run had no unseemly intentions. Heart aching, he truly wanted merely to warm Chuaning's chilled hands. He hadn't expected such a strong reaction and was stunned, speechless. The two of them looked at each other in the dim yellow candlelight. A drop of wax sputtered and popped, breaking the silence. Chuaning knew his skittishness had been suspicious, so he pressed his lips together and said nothing for a time, uneasy. When Mo-Run saw his expression, the tender sprout in his heart pushed upward more vigorously, striving to straighten its soft form, making his chest itch. Shisun? Chuaning said nothing. Do you... Mo-Run's sentence caught in his throat. Not knowing what lay ahead, he skidded to a halt before the precipice, held back by reason. He couldn't finish the thought. Mo-Run's question was incomplete. Nevertheless, Chuaning responded stiffly. No. Staring at him, Mo-Run asked, No what? No matter what you say, the answer is no, Chuaning scowled. Like a cat defending its territory with bared fangs, he was on guard, hackles raised. Let go. Mo-Run did. He laid his hand upon the chair back again, the picture of obedience. Chuaning returned to conjuring flowers, collecting the petals that had fallen earlier into a complete blossom. He was sulking, though mostly out of helplessness. After a while, Mo-Run spoke up again. Honestly, Shisun, I only wanted to ask if you felt cold. I just wanted to warm your hands. I'm not cold. Liar. The hand that Mo-Run touched had been icy. It was obvious that Chuaning found this situation excruciatingly awkward. If there's nothing else, you should get some sleep, he said. I'll take you to sell flowers tomorrow. Mo-Run didn't know how he should answer. Often, Chuaning used to say, I'll take you to cultivate, or I'll take you to meditate, or I'll take you to study. What was all this about I'll take you to sell flowers? He tried, but mostly failed, to suppress the laughter that bubbled up in his eyes, his pupils reflecting the man in the candlelight. He let out a soft hum of agreement, but he really couldn't bear to leave the table. Go to sleep. Mo-Run glanced at the bed. He'd resolved that he wouldn't go to sleep before Chuaning no matter what. He didn't know whether he was supposed to sleep on the bed or the floor, so he would wait and see what Chuaning did. If Chuaning went to sleep on the innermost side of the mattress, clearly leaving space for him, then he'd sleep on the bed. If Chuaning lay right in the middle, then he'd behave. His face reddened as he sneakily schemed. I won't sleep yet. What are you doing sitting here, then? Chuaning frowned. Mo-Run raised a hand and brought his long, slender fingers together. With a flourish, a fiery red butterfly made from spiritual energy appeared in midair. Chuaning stared blankly. For sale. Mo-Run grinned. With a light flick of his fingers, the red butterfly fluttered into the air and landed among the pile of Chuaning's haitong blossoms on the table. As it dove in and out of the flowers, it flapped its glowing wings as if pollinating them. Mine will be quite pricey. I'm a black-hearted scoundrel, so there'll be 10 gold apiece. Chuaning watched that pesky butterfly flying back and forth. It paused on one of his haitong blossoms to lap at its tender stamen. His face was like a thundercloud. Mo-Wei-Yu. What? What is it? Chuaning was so furious, he didn't know what to say or how to say it. He managed, finally, to quash the urge to explode. Flustered, he choked out, 3 copper coins each, at the very most. Mo-Run laughed out loud. When he'd chuckled a moment, he spun out another fiery red butterfly. He held out his hand, and the butterfly gently alighted upon the haitong blossom forming in Chuaning's fingertips. If I'm selling them to others, it'll be 10 gold. I think the price is fair. Then you can sell them to me. Chuaning took a deep breath and said fiercely, I'll go resell them myself. They can't be priced higher than my haitong blossoms. After some thought, he added, But I don't have any money on me now. I'll pay you once we get back to Xishang Peak. Smiling, Mo-Run spun out the third butterfly and sighed softly as the butterfly danced around Chuaning on swift wings. With his head propped against those sturdy arms the color of golden wheat, he said gently, Not a chance. Are you saying you won't let me buy on credit? Chuaning raised his chin, his eyes shining with anger and his face haughty. If Mo-Run really dared to say he wouldn't take his credit, then, as his teacher, Chuaning resolved to properly discipline this impudent, delusional man. That delusional man smiled even more brightly, his dimples deep and his tone warm. No, I wanted to say what? Chuaning's claws were bared, ready to strike out. I'll let you buy me out. Mo-Run left off the specifics, making the statement rather vague and suggestive. Resting his cheek against his arms, he gazed at Chuaning, perfectly earnest. It's all yours, free of charge. Never in a million years could Chuaning have anticipated such a response. Dazed, his face immediately flamed red. The hour was late. The little cottage was piled high with spiritual butterflies and high-tongue blossoms. They already had more than enough to sell, yet neither was willing to be the first to retire for the night. Mo-Run's worries were self-evident. He figured he would see where Chuaning slept and act accordingly. Although Chuaning wasn't aware of his plan, he wasn't stupid either. He felt a vague uneasiness. He, too, wanted to know what Mo-Run would choose. Would he sleep on the floor or on the bed? This man was giving Chuaning an ever-increasing sense of danger, but if Mo-Run really lay down on the bed, Chuaning didn't plan to chase him off. He was painfully aware of that hidden thread of hope in his heart, the hope that he would see Mo-Run wearily get to his feet, say, I'm sleepy, and lie down on the bed. Why is he still awake? Chuaning and Mo-Run each spun out more flowers and butterflies, both impatiently thinking the same thought. Go to sleep already. If you lie down on the bed first, then I'll... Shisun? Aren't you tired? It's so late, you should rest. No need. I'm used to it. Thus, another 2 hours passed. Mo-Run. Why are you still sitting here? I'm making more butterflies. If Shisun's tired, you should go to sleep first. I'll be up a little longer. This is the funniest gay chicken I've ever seen in my entire life. Chuaning expended every effort to suppress his yawns, grinding his molars together. He hadn't slept for 2 nights in a row, and the rims of his eyes were red with fatigue, yet still he insisted, I'm not tired yet. Mo-Run watched him steadily. Little by little, the room became an ocean of butterflies and high-tongue blossoms, overflowing with dazzling red and gold. Who knew how much time had passed when Mo-Run blearily raised his head again, only to jolt wide awake? An exhausted Chuaning had slumped against the table and fallen asleep where he sat. A half-formed high-tongue blossom lingered on his fingertips, its petals fluttering delicately with each of his breaths. Mo-Run stepped around and carefully lifted that fragmented flower. He placed it on the table and gathered Chuaning into his arms. That is the end of the chapter. We are on page... Oh, dear fucking God. We're on page 257 for chapter 177, which is called... Shisun Pretends to Sleep. Chuaning had gone 2 days without sleep. He had fallen into a deep slumber. Mo-Run quietly drew him into his arms and carried him to bed, his movements so gentle Chuaning never stirred. Mo-Run placed him in the very middle of the bed. Cradling the back of his neck, he laid his head down softly on the pillow and pulled the blankets up over him. But after tucking Chuaning in, Mo-Run didn't step back. He fixed his eyes on Chuaning's face. Inch by inch, his infatuated gaze drifted from Chuaning's sooty brows down to his pale lips. Gorgeous. His Shisun, his Chuaning, how was he so damn gorgeous? After sneaking a few more glances, Mo-Run's heart softened, while a certain other part of him did quite the opposite. He is 22. There we are. His scalp tingled, but reason was a yoke around his neck. He knew it was wrong, but Chuaning's face was so close, just a breath away, and the faint scent of high-tongue on his body was like an army of pliant talons piercing Mo-Run's facade of respectability, enticing Mo-Run to shed his clothes and join Chuaning in this warm bed. Perhaps it was the surging of Mo-Run's blood like a rushing river, or the beating of his heart like an unstoppable war drum, or the scalding heat of his blazing gaze that woke Chuaning. Whatever the reason. I just totally, all I had to do was take a breath and I knocked myself off course. Whatever the reason, Chuaning abruptly blinked open his eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Mo-Run sat stock still. As Chuaning's drowsiness gave way to astonishment, he met Mo-Run's fiery gaze with wide eyes. He jolted fully awake at once. "What are you doing?" This strong and gallant youth wore an inscrutable expression. As he slowly leaned down, Chuaning froze in alarm. "Did we drop hands? Because that may have been a mistake." Mo-Run drew closer still. Chuaning's heart thumped wildly. With a soft swish, their surroundings went dim, plunged into a suggestive gloom. After he'd pulled the bed curtain closed, Mo-Run straightened and settled on the edge of the bed. Looking down at Chuaning, he said evenly, "I saw Shisun fell asleep, so I wanted to close the curtains for you. I didn't mean to wake you." Chuaning didn't make a sound. Propped against the pillow, he raised his head slightly to gaze at Mo-Run. The dull yellow of the drapes fluttered idly behind him, and the candlelight from the table had become nebulous and hazy, like fog gathered on a window in winter-time. It was too dim to read Mo-Run's handsome features. There were only two shining eyes in the dark night, brilliant as fallen stars. "Shisun," Mo-Run said without preamble. "There's something I want to ask you." Chuaning held his tongue. In the darkness, this disciple seemed to have screwed up his courage. Chuaning's heart seized in his chest. Is he going to ask me about the brocade pouch? He wondered. His face remained impassive, but stormy waves surged in his chest. Was it too late to pretend to be asleep? "Where should I sleep?" Mo-Run asked. Chuaning stared at him in silence. Immediately after asking the question, Mo-Run began to have regrets. His overeager and practically ravenous body had no business sleeping in the same bed as Chuaning. He was no stranger to how terrifying a man's desire could be once awakened. And so, after agonizing over this very question for half the night, Mo-Run came to his own answer. "The bed's too small. I'll take the floor," he concluded. "Is there another set of blankets?" "There is." "Will you be cold?" "It's okay. I'll just add some straw." And so saying, Mo-Run left the cottage to gather a pile of straw and returned to deftly flatten it into a pallet. After the fright Mo-Run had given him, Chuaning was no longer sleepy. He flipped onto his side, head propped against the pillow, and lifted the bed curtain to silently watch Mo-Run bustle about. "I'm hitting the hay. Sweet dreams, Shisun." Mo-Run lay down without removing his clothes and pulled the blankets around him. His ink-dark eyes were full of steady warmth as they gazed at Chuaning upon the bed. Chuaning responded. At Mo-Run's display of apparent obedience, Chuaning let out a breath of relief and put on his own show of perfect aloofness. Feigning disaffection, he released the curtain and lay back in his bed. Mo-Run sat up again. "What are you doing?" "Putting out the light." Mo-Run got to his feet and blew out the candle. "Jesus fucking Christ, guys." Silence descended upon the little cottage. The master on the bed and his disciple below both stared into the boundless night, their hearts each heavy with private worries, bathed in the faint glow of golden high-tongue blossoms and scarlet butterflies. "Shisun, what is it now? Are you sleeping or not?" "I'm sleeping." Mo-Run's voice sounded exceptionally gentle in the darkness. "I just wanted to tell you something all of a sudden." Chuaning pursed his lips. His pulse didn't race so quickly as the first time his imagination had gone haywire, but his throat still felt dry. "I wanted to say, Shisun, you don't have to be so cautious when you sleep. You always curl up in one corner of the bed." There was a hint of a smile in Mo-Run's voice, low and mellifluous. "It's just a habit," came Chuaning's eventual reply. "Why?" "My room's too messy. One time I fell off the bed when I rolled over in my sleep and cut myself on a file on the floor." His words left Mo-Run speechless for a long, long moment, until Chuaning asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," said Mo-Run. His voice sounded closer than before. Chuaning turned his head. Through the gauze of the curtain, by the faint light of the high-tongue blossoms and butterflies, he saw that Mo-Run had pulled his pallet over to the bed. Mo-Run lay down once more. Shisun doesn't need to worry when I'm around," he said with a laugh. "You won't be stabbed by anything if you fall." "That's being optimistic, Mo-Run." After a pause, he added, almost carelessly, "I'm here." Chuaning said nothing. A while later, Mo Run heard a soft snort from the man on the bed. I can't believe this is actually coming out of Chuaning's mouth. Your biceps are so hard that hitting them might be no better than hitting that file. Mo Run chuckled. There's I need a second. There's something even harder that Shisun hasn't seen yet. He was, honest to goodness, thinking of his pecs. But the instant the words left his mouth, he realized how filthy they sounded. Panicked, he blurted, "That's not what I meant." Chuaning had already lapsed into an embarrassed silence after the first sentence. Now, the atmosphere between them had truly deteriorated beyond saving. Of course he knew Mo Run was in possession of a hotter and harder weapon, far more terrifying than any of Chuaning's glinting mechanical implements. Forget that accursed cultivation world ranking list he'd glimpsed by accident. He had inadvertently felt the thing for himself through their clothes. That was a weapon so full of fearsome passion that it sent shivers down one's spine. Go to sleep, Chuaning snapped. A pause. But how could they possibly sleep? The two of them lay in the throes of love's torment, its magma lapping at their chests, so searing their rib cages were on the verge of cracking. In the quiet of the room, each could hear the other's soft breathing, his tossing and turning. Pillowing his head on one arm, Mo Run stared at the dancing scarlet butterflies filling the cottage. One fluttered over to the bed curtain, casting its warm red glow upon the gauze. In the silence, Mo Run suddenly remembered. At Jinchun Lake all those years ago, the person who had rescued him from the Heartpluck Willow's illusion seemed to have murmured something into his ear. He had been far too gone in the moment. Perhaps he'd imagined it. He couldn't be sure. But reflecting on it now, he felt that his ears might not have deceived him after all. That it might have been real. Back then, when he had heard Chuaning say, "I like you too," Mo Run's heart raced. Each seemingly insignificant detail from days past was like twigs and cuttings scattered upon the ground, now sprouting and branching out, tender leaves and vivid stamens unfurling. Nourished by this brazen thought, they grew into a towering tree. His mind was curiously blank, the world a dizzying blur before his eyes. The more he thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. I like you too. I like you too. If he had misheard, if Chuaning had never said these words, then why had he been unwilling to admit he'd been the one to save Mo Run when they woke up from the illusion in Jinchung Lake? It made no sense. Unless Mo Run hadn't misheard, unless Chuaning had really said, Mo Run jolted upright in bed, unable to contain his agitation. "Shisun," he called hoarsely. Silence. There was no response from behind the curtain, but Mo Run pressed ahead nevertheless. "When I was doing the laundry today, I found something. It was within the drapes. Everything remained perfectly still. Do you know what it was?" As the words crowded to the tip of his tongue, he suddenly panicked. The question came out, clumsy and halting. No reply came. The silence stretched. He's faking it, but he hears it. Is the important thing is what we're really taking away from this. Mo Run hesitated, his eyes dark and shining. "Shisun, are you asleep? Did you hear anything I said?" Lying on the bed, shielded by the thin gauze curtains. Whoa, did I just... No, shielded by the thin gauze curtain, Chuaning didn't move a muscle. He might have really been asleep. Mo Run waited. He reached a hand toward the curtain several times in dissatisfaction, only to stop himself at the last second. Shisun, he mumbled the final time before lying down once more. His voice was terribly quiet, even fragile. No! 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 Fucking no! Fucking no! Fucking no! Fucking no! Fucking no! No, I'm not, you know, I kind of want to go on strike. I Shisun, he mumbled a final time before lying down once more. His voice was terribly quiet, even fragile. Pay attention to me. But of course his Shisun would do no such thing. Chuaning was a total mess. He had always taken pride in being clear of mind, but now his head may as well have been filled with black smoke. He lay on the bed, staring blankly at the swirling, white-patterned canopy in the darkness. What exactly is Mo-Run trying to do, he wondered, his thoughts sluggish and stiff. He racked his brain for an answer, considering every sort of outlandish possibility. The only one he didn't dare entertain was the most obvious. He didn't dare suppose that Mo-Run liked him too. He was like a starving man who had unexpectedly found himself in possession of a delectably crispy meat pie. Because the pie was hard-won and precious, he'd gnawed off the entire crust, but couldn't bear to start on the meaty filling. Chuaning listened to Mo-Run's low, harried murmurs penetrating the barrier of the canopy. He soundlessly drew the blanket up, covering his chin, then his nose, leaving only a pair of bright eyes. Then he pulled it over his eyes as well, until he was completely hidden beneath the covers. Of course he had heard Mo-Run, but how was he supposed to respond? His heart thundered, and his palms were clammy with sweat. He felt mortified, backed into a corner. He wanted nothing more than to sit straight up and launch into a fearless tirade. That's right, I hid that brocade pouch. Fine, I like you. There, satisfied? Now get lost. Stop asking questions, and go the fuck to sleep. He was tormented, on tenterhooks. A terrible itch gnawed at his chest. Shisun? Silence once again. Are you really sleeping? A long moment later, Chuaning heard Mo-Run sigh softly. Lying there in the darkness, head under the covers, he felt despondent yet terrified, nervous yet also somehow warm and tender. His emotions were a muddled mix of flavors, bitter and sweet and everything in between. He reminded himself to keep calm, but eventually he found himself kicking the blanket in frustration as his cheeks burned with heat. The end of the chapter. You know, they do this thing where whenever there's a scene of like utter and irreversible progression, it's always couched in all of this freaking like back and forth and just absolute agony to where it feels like a lateral move somehow in the relationship, even though it's not. It's most decidedly not, but it feels that way. And that brings about some type of frustration, let me tell you. We don't like her. I have apparently been made aware that there is interior art, which way? Back or the front? Have I already looked at the front? Hang on. No, that's the cover. Oh no, wait. Oh no. Oh, you're kidding. Is there any back? Oh, that's right, because the only thing on the cover art is, and the interior art is at the front. They really had to do this? They really had to do this. They had to do this. They had to do this. They were like, listen, the story's gonna be real mean to you for a second. And this is our way to try to make it a little bit better. They really, with the hair and the night sky and the moon and all the different red butterflies, what do you mean? The red of the butterflies and like the golden pale of the motherfucking flowers? You cannot be serious. They really, see, the artists spoil us while Meat Bun just drives us insane. It's this good cop, bad cop routine. You know what I mean? Jesus. I totally just, in my mad dash to the art, I just totally left my place. We were at page 265 for chapter 178, which is called Shisun Sells Flowers. So it seems like we are actually going to see them on the street selling their wares a little bit. But we get to do that next week, where we will be finishing this volume, again, whatever that means, and then taking a break. We are taking a little bit of a break in order to read Captive Prince and also every, 2-3 volumes of Erha. It is really nice to take a second, read something different, also kind of give the chance for the rest of Erha to be released, because I feel like it's better to take breaks every now and then, go through it at a nice, leisurely pace, and wait for the volumes to be released ahead of time, rather than reading everything as soon as possible, and then we have to stop dead and wait as volumes are released. This seems better. This feels better, at least for me. So we are indeed taking a break, and next Tuesday will be the last Erha stream for a while. I think I've calculated, and reading Captive Prince will take, I know it'll take us through May, and it should take us also through June. So we should be getting back to Erha in early to mid-July, I believe. Meanwhile, we have a little bit of a Captive Prince summer coming in, which, if you haven't read it, you want to show up for Captive Prince. Just trust me on this. Look at me. Trust me on this. You want to show up for Captive Prince. You really, really do. Just believe me. All right? Believe me. So, we get to finish this next week, and we get to start Captive Prince next week as well. But that is it for today. I'm overwhelmed. I gotta go. That was so much. I need to process. In that respect, I'm kind of glad that we have to wait until next Tuesday, and we have to wait a few days, because I need to process. I would like to sit in this feeling for a little bit. So I will. You guys have a lovely weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. I had a blast as per usual. I hope you had fun. And I will see you on Tuesday to finish Erha Volume 5. Alrighty? Okay. Please take care of yourselves, and I will see you then.